Tschüss, Mann. Yeah, let's see whether you really want to see me singing. My voice is a bit coarse today, so if I'm coughing in between, I'm not dying. It just sounds like that, so no worries. So, my talk is about data-driven is dead. It's a very provocative title that is intentional, and how you can actually spark life into data with use cases, because that's what you should do. First, who am I and why am I here? I started out as a PhD student and data scientist at some point. Actually, I studied bioinformatics because the term data science didn't exist back then. Maybe I'm getting old. Then I worked in gaming. I worked in whatever Xing is, social, whatever. I worked in incubator. And for the last 5 years, before I made myself a freelancer, I worked at FreeNow as the whatever you want to call it, person that does data and the data strategy. So if you ever open the FreeNow app, want to go from A to B and the price is increasing, you're welcome. That's what I built. And then I did the very altruistic move and fired myself so I could become a freelancer. Oh, yeah, there's also nice pictures of all the things I worked at. And now I'm actually, a data leader, principal, podcaster, advisor, speaker, whatever you want to call it, on demand. Yeah, and what I'm going to talk about today is why this is important, why it's important for people to have this big picture view from someone who's done this for quite some time. Because all the stuff is actually quite confusing, right? If you ever talk about data, I mean, we had this here quite a lot today. There's a lot of buzzwords. I think we are here more on the marketing bubble, so everyone knows about this kind of stuff. Analytics, marketing analytics, dashboard, reporting, and tracking. But there's also all this other stuff like data and MarTech and big data. And big data is so important that it's twice on the slide. Or I forgot it at some point to delete it, and now it's fun to actually say this every time. And it's actually in 2 different colors, so it works. Then there's also even more like analytics, data warehouses, databases. Then there's the first KPIs like CLV. Who in this room can define the customer lifetime value? So everyone understands this. That's a good response. No one says anything. I think that's rather like this Huma move that you go back into the hedge. And then there's even more stuff, like this whole thing like there's AI, there's machine learning, there's artificial intelligence. Now there's all this Gen AI stuff, there's LLMs and so on, there's these analytics engineers, whatever. So it's actually quite hard to understand all this stuff. And on the other side, we have even more buzzwords when we look at all the tools. And I'll actually go over this quite quickly because you know all of these. There's a lot of Google stuff, there's a lot of stuff from Microsoft. There's Pivot, there's Supermetrics, there's Matomo, there's Tableau, BigQuery, and even more. So there's a lot of things you actually have to understand to do something with data. And it's even more difficult, because how do you actually get this whole data stuff into your company in a big picture level? So usually you start with tracking. I won't talk about tracking a lot because I think that has been done today for quite some time. And then you have this data somehow. Either you get it in batch or you get it at streaming, which is just 2 fancy words for saying either you get it every 24 hours or once a day, or you get it in real time. As you might remember, real time was the hot shit topic a few years ago. Nowadays there's a lot of stuff which is good in real time, but most of the things you don't need real time. There's a few things like, for example, fraud checks or the search pricing I just talked about, which we actually built in real time at FreeNow. Then you store the data somehow and you put it, you can look at it with an SQL query engine, and in the end you have reporting tools. And obviously all these are data pipelines. And now if you look even further, you can build this quite nicely because there's loads of tools. We talked about all of these, and I should have put more Google stuff on it, sorry. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things you have to do for mobile, like you need something like Adjuster Apps Flyer, otherwise no ARMs, no cookies. Even though there are no cookies on mobile, stupid joke. And you can have something like Mixpanel, Matomo, Analytics, and so on. And then there's a lot of tools you need to understand to actually get data from A to B, like Fivetran or DBT or Segment, which I all like a lot. And then you store this somehow, either in one of the normal clouds everyone knows about, or you are like quite a big older company, then you might have something like Exasol or Vertica or Oracle. Then you have all the nice query engines where we all use BigQuery because everything else is not that great. And somehow you want to see this data. Yeah. And then there's also more. There might be more stuff like things like Atriba or Funnel or Supermetrics, because you also need to get more data in, like marketing, cost, for example. And then there also might be some kind of CRM in the end. And this is all great. Now imagine you have all this. So you have built a nice data stack, and usually I would show the data stack slide I like best, which is all very googly, so I didn't want to be brown-nosing here, but that's the way that it works best, actually. But the problem is, no one uses this. So you have this great data warehouse. I can also talk about data layers. Data warehouse, which gets data from A to B. The normal way you do it is with 3 different layers. So you get raw data in somehow. Then you take this data, you do something with it. For example, there's always the big question, what's revenue? Sometimes revenue is gross, sometimes revenue is net, sometimes revenue is with shipping costs, sometimes revenue is with handling costs, sometimes not. So the refined layer would actually build this, and then in the end there's a nice abstraction layer where you can just stack or slap all your reporting tools on. And this is there now. Now you're in this company, you have this great layer structure, all the data is there, you build everything, there's nice dashboards, but something doesn't work. Hey, there's this data person. We build all these great tables and dashboards. Are you finally happy? Marketing people, product people, finance people. No, man, it's all great, but I don't get it, and it doesn't solve any of my problems. And that's the standard issue we have almost everywhere, right? I mean, I've been working for, I'm not sure, 5 companies in my normal life, now as a freelancer for another 5 or 6, and it's always the same problem, because someone starts building or someone starts requesting, but there is really not a proper discussion between those people, right? Because usually, if you look at this, there's 2 different languages. And that might be a bit mean, but I'm a data person, so I can say this. Data teams are often quite technical and also very focused on their tools. It might be a bit too academic. So I have a PhD. I would rather not hire people who have a PhD in data, because that doesn't really lead to good things quite often. And funny anecdote, when I made my way out of academia, I got this great question in one of my interviews, which was like, do you know what an A/B test is? And I was like, no, never heard of that. Looked it up at home, was like, yeah, it's a Wilcoxon square test. I did this 5,000 times, but there's just different terms, right? You just don't know. And you look like an idiot, and this looking like an idiot just doesn't happen in interviews. It also happens when people talk to each other. And it's like this, right? So the data person's like, hey, we have built this nice ETL with all the data. We put AI on it. It's all running on a cluster. There's many models that give you great KPIs with machine learning, a very low MAPE in the data lake, and if you want more, write a ticket. And on the other side, there's the marketing person who's like, I don't get this shit. Well, what are you talking about? On the other way around, it's also not that much better the other way around, right? Because marketing people are often quite focused on their channel, on their country. And as you all know, if you work with paid search, or if you work with branding, or if you work with social, or with organic stuff, or SEO, or whatever, also the words are quite different. So even some marketing people can't talk to each other. But if you're just this data guy who came from university now has to do something with marketing, that's quite tough. And that's like, oh, we have to do more ads in digital. The CPX is too high. We have to grow, and this has to become viral. Our SEO is shit. I think we need to do more in CRM, and then we trigger something, and then we can actually use all our budget. And I said like this, yeah, great. I also don't know what you're talking about. So the idea is really, don't talk about this data-driven shit, because the worst thing that can happen is actually someone builds the best data warehouse, all the data is there, all the tables and dashboards are there, but in the end, no one gets it, because you actually have to talk about the use cases. Data-driven is not the important thing. It's more about what do you really need? What do you have to solve? What's the problem you have? And I have a very easy way to do this, because every time I go into a new company, I do a stupid survey. And in the stupid survey, I ask these 4 questions. What are the questions you need to answer on a daily basis? So you come to work, your boss is like, hey, what happened yesterday? And then you're like, yeah, I would like to know that, but you don't know how to use the data, or the data isn't even there to answer this question. So that's the first thing. Do you know how to use this data to answer these questions? Is the data even there? And even if the data is there, as we just said before, there might be these great dashboards, there might be great data pipelines and everything. Do you have access to that? And do you even understand this? Because, as I said before, the dashboard says revenue. What's the revenue? Is the revenue actually before cost, after cost? Is it profit? Is it some kind of contribution margin? You never know. And yeah, also quite important, how do you use data to steer your business? That's something we will look at in another slide, but that's also a very important question. So in the end, what is your most important use case? That's always the thing you have to start with. Don't build a data warehouse. Actually, take a piece of paper, draw a stupid dashboard. put 3 or 4 numbers on it. These are the things I want to get. And then you have to talk to your data people. What are the low-hanging fruits? What are really data points you have already? What's quite easy to solve? And what is the big picture? Big picture is quite important because I just always like to tell this anecdote. It's good to focus on one certain KPI and one certain level in the funnel. But back to the FreeNow app, we had this great team that had the task to improve the conversion rate from you open the app and put in your destination and you see a price. And they were like, oh, we have to improve the amount of people that actually see this price. What did they do? They put a voucher in for everyone. So everyone had €2 off, which was great because the conversion rate skyrocketed. The profit was not existent anymore. Yeah, that also led to some firings, but that was right. So you always have to look at the big picture, right? Don't just look at your tiny piece. So in the end, I want your use case for the whole company. And obviously, there has to be some memes in here. The biggest use case is always get rid of manual processes. So I'm talking to some marketing people, and the usual thing is, oh, I have to go into this tool, I have to put in 3 or 5 CSVs. That never works. So I think the most important use case is always, wherever I go, do something nice and make the manual processes go away. And for this, it's always good to really understand what are the KPIs we have to use first. Also something that happens in a lot of companies that everyone thinks about the KPIs, and people think about millions of KPIs. They want to do this, they want to do that, they want to do everything. My favorite thing is like we have this ratio from A to B, B to C, C to D, then we also have B to D, A to C, and that also doesn't work. So usually you have to ask yourself first, where is your business? Is your business on a growth trajectory? Is your business focusing on retention? Or is your business on a path to profitability? And I always like to ask these questions because the usual answer is all 3 of it. Yeah, sure. Obviously, you want all 3 of these things, but if you want to do this, you have to focus on different KPIs. So you always have to think a bit more about what's our current level, because then you can actually go and build something up which is a KPI tree. So you can think about the most important KPIs, and these KPIs are usually totally fine to understand your whole business. And I always like to show this very stupid KPI tree. Doesn't matter which company you are in, I think this thing up there is quite important. No profit, no money. If there's no profit, it's quite hard to pay your salaries. So that should always be there. Profit could also be that you get money from internal investors. That's also fine. But the usual thing is profit comes out of revenue minus cost. Done. Also very easy. And the fun thing is already these 3 KPIs help you a lot to understand how your business works, right? If the profit goes down and the revenue goes up, maybe your costs are too high. Maybe you should think about CPAs or whatever. And it's always quite easy to understand where the revenue comes from because it's usually the people that use your business, active users, whatever, and what they do. So it could be an order, it could be a subscription, it could be baskets, it could be whatever. The amount of people that are active in your business and what they do. And on the other side, you have marketing cost. And obviously marketing cost is also not completely unrelated because this is a tree, but it's also somehow more like a family tree of from Alabama or Kentucky because it's circular. So the marketing cost also is important for the active users. And we can go even further because this is only a part of it. When you have this, you can go down further and further and further and further. And the nice thing is also there might be a part of the company for whom the marketing cost is like the North Star KPI. And then they can also go down and know, hey, I have to understand how my cost actually evolves and where it comes from. And usually it comes from the clicks and how expensive a click is, or acquisitions, or leads, or impressions, whatever your business is. And on the other side, at the same time, where do your active users come from? Active users come from people that are interested in your business, who you convert to become an active user. So it's also, again, active users are leads times the conversions per leads. And again, this is also circular because obviously the clicks also influence the leads. It's all one thing that goes around. And now I said it's important where your business is. Yeah, it would be now nice to focus on all of this, right? This is already too much. This is already too much for people to look at. And it's more important to say, what is the current strategy? So if you are doing growth, retention, or profitability, for growth, these are the KPIs that are more important. So for growth, it's really important to get people into your business. That could be installs if you have an app business, that could be signups, whatever. It's important to convert these, that there are more new users, and obviously for growth, it's also important that people use your business. So we could now actually discuss whether it's orders or active users, but in the end, this is something you should look at. When you have retention, it's more important to see how many active users do you have and how many of these are coming back. Because it would be awesome to focus on retention and you have 5 million active users, of which 2 are returning. Everyone else is being paid for and coming, no one's coming back. And obviously also orders. If you have profitability, well, not a big surprise, it's revenue, costs, and profit. And something that people actually quite often don't look at is the average order value, or how much are people actually spending in your business. Because profitability always nicer if you have a recurring customer that pays a lot of money. Nice example from Good Game Studios where I worked at. I worked there from 2014 to 2016. A lot of money was still coming in from the cohorts from 2009 who started playing in web. I'm not sure. People really loved this shit, and the people that stayed there for quite some time just, stayed as well. Also important, these are all KPIs, but now we're going a bit back to the big picture thing, because this is awesome, but I always like to say, this is something for a normal business. If the business would be viral and if the product would be perfect, then you don't need me. Then you don't need marketing. Then it just works. And that was something that worked, for example, at MyTaxi back in the day, because that was the only app on the market. It just worked. And then Uber came in. And then other companies came in. And then we had to start thinking about, maybe we have to really look at our data. But this is really the thing, because there's this very nice concept, which is steering after beats. Makes sense, drum beats. Which means the first thing you should look at is actually how your business behaves. So if you come into work every day, and every day the revenue is increasing, the orders are increasing, the cost is fine, then you don't have to look at shit, right? I mean, it just works, fine, perfect. Then the next thing is also something we talked a lot about today, is experiments. If you see something isn't working perfectly, and that's also something which I think becomes more important nowadays due to GDPR, due to California Act, due to all these data privacy things, look at what happens when you start something new. For example, you start a TV flight. Is your baseline improving? You start something on the App Store. That's also something. Look at things that are changing. And then we come to analytics. That's actually the first thing where you look at data. That's the next step. When you're not able to understand stuff anymore, by these means, look at analysis, then it's also important to track. And last but not least, the unloved child is surveys. Surveys are not perfect, but still, surveys will never get you great data, right? It's always very, very subjective what people answer. People don't remember what they did. But for example, when you do stuff like TV flights, for example, and you have a fancy heuristical model with machine learning and neural networks and all these buzzwords, it's quite nice to ask people, hey, where did you come from? And if this somehow goes in the same direction as your numbers, perfect. Yeah. Oh, and very important, I said this before, KPIs should always follow KISS. What's KISS? KISS is keep it simple, stupid. So that's also really the other thing. Avoid ratios of ratios of ratios. Really use the funnel, look at the funnel steps. It is fine to do a conversion rate from the first step to the last step, but don't do anything in between, like summing this together, it's just weird. Also, avoid KPIs which are based on complex models. It's always the thing. When you have a model that might give you the best KPI, the model might be perfect, it might be very advanced, very intelligent. If people don't understand this, and if, for example, your marketing people don't understand this, your product people don't understand this, that's going to be bad. Even worse, if you have a taxi business and you give out a KPI to taxi drivers and they don't get it, they will just go somewhere else. And define your KPI. So that's really the most important thing. Understand your use case, and the use case has to work in a way that you have KPIs that define this use case, and everyone has to understand in the same way. So build all your KPIs based on use cases and make them stupid. So, and a use case can really be something like, I want to understand every day how many products I sold. Then you need orders. I want to understand every day how much revenue I made net, because I want to know from which country these revenues come. And yeah, then it's the next one, define your KPIs. And if you've done all this, then you can do something very, very easy. You can build a Star KPI dashboard, which is like the stupidest thing ever, but I love these things. And if you look at this, you can probably guess what my favorite dashboarding tool is. It's also from Google, and it's not Looker, but something smaller. The important thing is really, you just need a few KPIs, right? On this one, you have orders, revenue, cost, users, and that's it. And with this, you can already define all these things. You can see, oh, how are my orders from yesterday to today? How did my revenue change? How much is the cost? Do I have more new users, more active users? And what's my average order value? And this can now be further, well, it doesn't have a pointer. This can now be further filtered by countries, by channels, by time filters. And this already gives you almost everything. I didn't put the FreeNow version on top of it. But at FreeNow, we had an even stupider dashboard. The dashboard just showed every day how much revenue did we make, how many tours did we make. Because quite easy, if the revenue increases and the tours go down, not bad. If the tours increase and the revenue goes down, maybe not that great. And if you have a flat line, something is broken. So you can actually see most of the stuff, and you can go down quite quickly and understand the problems. Yeah. So that's actually it already, and I've talked for 25 minutes. So what should you do? Listen and repeat. The normal way I would always go is decide and understand the strategic direction of your business. That's it. Build use cases out of it. Understand what you want to do and have this common shared knowledge. And then decide on a set of Star KPIs, never more than 5, because that is somehow the level where people can't grasp it anymore. And define these KPIs and document them, and also make people understand this is the use case this KPI solves. This is the other use case this KPI solves. And then explain this KPI framework to the whole company and provide daily updates on the North Stars. And it's not like put the dashboard somewhere, but put the dashboards into people's faces. Best way is actually to send something every morning via email, or if you have a nice office where people go to nowadays, then it's also quite cool to put TV screens on there and put the KPIs on the TV screens. And if that happened, you will usually have this, everyone's happy now, party, 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 and you can steer your business properly and everyone understands this. Yeah, and that's it already. If you want to hear more about this stuff, I have a few podcasts where I talk about data. I also have one where I talk about trash TV. So that's it.